So let's turn the page to discuss the security challenges in AI LLMs. And we're going to cover, let's see if I can grab that, the significance of proactive security measures, DAN 13.5, potential for prompt injection and impersonation. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the consequences of malicious prompt injection, theft, false information, erosion of trust, which we all know, right? That's all pretty much given. For those of you who've been in this industry for a while, that's just the common. So in my research, this is what I've discovered, that by implementing a proactive security measures, and I know some of this sounds like common sense, but unfortunately during development, this is not being implemented as vastly as it should globally. Such as creating new internal security policies and parameters, or processes that really address UX, UI, user interface, user experience, our user experience, user interface, UI. So if you allow the usage of LL tools in your organizations, you really should treat them kind of as a third-party vendor, which means that they must be vetted properly as much as possible. Enforcing password rule changes and enforcing multi-factor authentication, implementing, data encryption for standards of transport storage that's being adhered to. Similar to kind of some OWASP guidelines and standards. You want to kind of keep it along those lines. The difference is that you're utilizing or viewing ChatGPT or other tools that are in your system that you decide to either develop and those you decide to purchase, that you're viewing it from the lens of treating it as a third party. If it's going to be, a TPRM, third party risk management, you're going to integrate that into your program, and you're going to treat it as such, right, as any other application or system in your ecosystem. So treating it like as a third party means integrating and managing it with the same standards. As I mentioned, OWASP is being one of them, precautions and oversights that you would also naturally, externally look at, even if you had software, again, or any hardware or any other systems in your organizations, just to ensure that the consistency in the security and functionality is also compliant. So it's, again, viewing large language models, LLM tools in your organization as such as any other tool that's in your organization that is sitting in your ecosystem, your security ecosystem. You want to provide oversight to that. We guard against prompt engineering and abuse. Prompt engineering is the DAN 13.5. Some of you may or may not have heard of that, but it's relatively old, but it's the concept that plays into it, which is why I'm still talking about it. It was a prompt injection which poses a significant threat to generative AI systems at the early stages of ChatGPT. And it's a role-playing model for ChatGPT that allows AI to assume different roles, like for example, a sophisticated attack that deceitfully injects a malicious prompt into an LLM, and it manipulates the output to users like ourselves. So if a threat actor assumes the role of a medical provider, for example, you have a specific way of communicating to that medical provider, be it text messages, be it emails, or phone calls for that matter. Financial institutions, the same way. They have the ability to do impersonations. Now, I mentioned DAN 13.5, but there are other GPT tools that have already presently been designed and are already on the market and being used that use a similar impersonation process for malicious intent. And I'll cover that a little later in my presentation. But the idea is that this type of attack obviously leads to massive amounts of possible data loss, IP loss, funds for that matter. So as technologists, as developers, as leaders, all of us, we really must adopt a security approach that is consistently focused on also counterintelligence, right? Countering those potential threats, countering those potential vulnerabilities in our systems, and look at it in terms of monitoring, of course, in monitoring, addressing the issues that are going to be that could potentially expose all of our organizations. So we want to take that proactive approach to do that. And that's what I mean by taking a proactive approach in terms of securing measures. So let's move on. So the new versus old. Now we have had in our industry for many decades now, we have had the opportunity as security professionals, as thought leaders, as practitioners in the domain of security, we have had the opportunity to test on a robust level multiple types of security by design methodologies. And part of it, we're going to start with the world's fascination with generative AI tools. We know that innovation is going to continue to thrive. It's going to continue to grow. But as security professionals, we're obviously a lot more sensitive about the security aspects and the guardrails that we put place, protecting protecting ourselves, protecting the world from innovation so that they don't get out of control. So we have to put some security guardrails around that. Smartwatches was no different. There were some security issues around the design implementation of smartwatches many years ago when they were first launched. So we want to kind of redirect our focus and learn from the past, basically. Consumers really drive developers, and it's not the other way around. We as consumers drive the development of new innovations. We always want something new, something cool. So as technologists, we recognize that if security were prioritized truthfully, it would be integrated consistently throughout the entire development lifecycle. So from a risk analysis to testing, literally all the way through. Adopting a security by design approach, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, ensures that technology is inherently fortified against those threats, the best that we possibly can, right? For those of you who are in security, you understand that through and through. Second, engineers should prioritize security from the beginning of the AI development. And I'm talking about developers. So developers can implement it as an automatic part process. Although various software development life cycles, SDLC methodologies like waterfall and agile have been active for at least a couple of decades now, AI developments, including ChatGPT, DALL-E, Google's Bard, and Google's new similar LLM that's being launched soon, which is Genius. I think it's Genius or Genuine. I'll double check on that. You guys can definitely Google it. But Google just launched a new tool that is even more comprehensive in terms of its learning language model. And that is very, very extremely robust. And it includes voice, text, audio, visual, and still build a lack of security focus, right? So even though those developments are still in development, they're still coming out with new modules of those particular tools, security is now being thought of, and it has been, and we know this, as kind of an afterthought. So it's really essential to incorporate, in my opinion, the security by design approach in AI as with any other SSDLC, secure by design lifecycle methodologies. So Contrasting with AI development with traditional SDLC methodologies, it should include a proactive approach, a responsive approach, least privilege, input validation, and secure defaults. And that's the aspect of SDLC, which is why I believe that you can take both the AI development lifecycle process and this SDLC process, incorporate the SDLC process, and integrate them too as a part of a new development. Again, so going on to our next slide, we talk about API security for generative AI. So once that tool, that system is designed, we want to kind of dive into, the open AI modernization offers tools to screen and filter content. It does. So that's what OpenAI Modernization API offers. It also enables developers to implement a custom filtration to ensure that user interaction is aligned and predefined standards and avoid inappropriate, harmful content. That's the idea. Swearing, for example, right? Or inappropriate language or inappropriate use of language. The modernization endpoint of it analyzes the content for, like I said, hateful speech, harmful words, sexual content, we're talking words, abusive language, swearing, as I mentioned earlier. And it basically filters all of that out. And it blocks all the content generated by OpenAI's API. And organizations can actually create their own filtration. It doesn't necessarily have to be OpenAI's Modernization API. I'm just giving you an idea or suggestion that it does exist and that there is an actual filtration system for content that actually exists on the market for those organizations who are interested in designing their own LLM tools. But still with that, you still want to make sure that there are safeguards around the implementation of those designs. So when I talked about treating AI tools like other third-party AIs, that's what I'm actually speaking about, to bring it back full circle, is that you want to see that system as a system. And you want to treat it as such if it is something that you are purchasing or it is something that you're developing and you plan to use it in your own organizations. So when I talked about e-crimes earlier about the DALL-E 13.5, I mentioned that there are other LLM attacks that have occurred using these three types. One is FraudGPT. And FraudGPT is an LLM that's, it sounds like it is. It's an LLM that is tailored specifically for fraudulent activities. The system can be programmed to craft believable phishing emails and messages impersonating in legitimate organizations. This is DALL-E 13.5 on steroids. That's basically what FraudGPT is. It is not designed by our technologists from a white hat perspective. This is designed by malicious attackers. This has been designed and has been on the market, has been purchased, and it is being used. That's the scary part. The WormGPT is designed to exploit vulnerabilities in your technical ecosystem. That's scary. It might spread through an entire network, literally hopping from one device to another and using AI to adapt. Remember, it's a large language model, so it's adaptive, and it finds the best strategy to infiltrate and even spread further. So giving the ambiguity of smart devices that we have now, such as a worm, could really cause some devastating impacts. Yeah, that one's it scares me. From taking control of smart homes, as well as other IoTs and disrupting corporate networks. The WormGPT is pretty scary. Though Added to that, there is another GPT tool that has been designed that is supposed to replace Worm GPT, and it's called Evil GPT. It's a chat bot that is presently, and probably at deception of the time of this presentation, it was being promoted maybe I'd say 2 months ago. We have no idea where it is now. But Chat GPT, it's a chat bot that's being promoted to replace Worm GPT. Now that could be occurring. This research was done recently over the last, let's say 60 days. That's possible that Evil GPT has already been launched and being used from malicious threat actors. So the sale of that particular AI tool may have already taken place by the time this presentation has occurred. But don't take my word for everything that I'm saying. I always encourage you to definitely do your research and check out other e-crimes and what's happening in that arena, and what can you as an organization do the best that you can to be prepared for counteracting malicious attempts that will be very very robust, malicious attacks that will have the ability to learn as they're ingested into organizations, into tools, into your system. So what can you do? NIST, according to NIST, it's a highly skilled and resourceful enemies, which we know. Various methods like hacking, physical break-ins, deceit, and infiltrated. The goals is to steal information. That's their bottom goal. But really what we need to do is ensure that we're constantly monitoring